news in the NFL. The Packers are releasing former All-Pro cornerback Jaire Alexander. That's been confirmed by our lead NFL insider, Jonathan Jones. He had 2 years remaining on his current deal. He was exploring trade options with Green Bay before being released. The move will save the Packers just over $17 million in cap space. Our NFL analyst, Bryant McFadden, joining us now with this breaking news. So, B-Mac, Alexander spent the first 7 years of his career in Green Bay. Played just in 14 games over the last 2 seasons, dealing with injuries. And B-Mac now hitting free agency for the first time in his career. How do you expect this one to play out?
Well, considering he has, a good bill of health, Jenny, I think the market for Jaire Alexander should be very, very intensive because he is that type of player. When he's healthy, he's a great player. You don't question anything with his defensive back ability. Sound in coverage, big-time playmaker, and he's a willing participant in the running game. Loves to tackle as well. But to your point, over the last 2 seasons, the Green Bay Packers, they've grown accustomed to playing without Jaire Alexander. That led to the move happening today. But I don't think he will be available long, Jenny. He's a guy that can really improve not just the secondary, but the entire defense. So if you're a team that's kind of straddling the fence of being a playoff caliber team, or if you're a team that has championship-like aspirations, if everything checks out with the medical, no question, you got to pull the trigger and try to make a move for Jaire Alexander.
Jonathan Jones reporting landing spots for Alexander. He said the Rams, the Cowboys, the Bucks, the Raiders, the Panthers, Vikings, Falcons, and Cardinals. Where do you like seeing him fit the most?
Coming from JJ, I love those teams. I love Atlanta. I love the Rams, clearly. Heck, you can throw Miami into the equation also, Jenny, because clearly they're trying to move on from their best cornerback in Jalen Ramsey. But there was a team, as I listened to you, I didn't hear come out of your mouth in terms of what you gave us from Jonathan Jones. There's the team I would like to throw into the equation. What about the Philadelphia Eagles?
Ooh.
Right? Think about this. Now, when you look at what the Eagles did a year ago, no question, outstanding defensive performances throughout the year led to a championship. But they moved on from big play Slay, Darius Slay. Now when you look at Quinyon Mitchell, no question, he's a guy you want to build around. But outside of Quinyon Mitchell, Keely Ringo is slated to be the starting cornerback opposite of Quinyon Mitchell. If you're a Howie and if everything checks out in terms of the medical, you gotta see what it would take to go get Jaire Alexander, because you gotta understand something about this secondary. They're going to get every opposing offense's best effort in terms of how well they played a year ago, and just adding more experience along with more playmaking ability that Jaire has at his disposal. If I'm Howie, I roll the dice, because one thing Howie has that the other teams don't have: championships. A recent championship, and that could be a great recruiting pitch to get a guy like Jaire Alexander, who clearly wants to get an opportunity to hoist the Sticky Lombardi.
The most recent championship. I would say that's a great little tool you got. Hey, you want one of these? Come over here, buddy. All right, B-Mac, don't go anywhere. We've got more coming from you shortly as we take a look at the notable Packers odds this season. Things are looking pretty good for the Green Bay Packers, although Jaire Alexander will no longer be on this team. Over 9.5 wins, plus 110. I take that.
So the other day, what was it? We had the Godfather 3 quote.
Yeah.
And now...
You know what movie that's from? This one is?
Yeah, the movie with Tom Cruise.
Which one? Top Gun?
No, the one where he's an agent. With,
human head weighs
wait, now
11 pounds.
Wait, now I don't remember. With Renee Zellweger?
Yeah!
What is the movie called again?
Jerry Maguire!
Jerry, can you say it? Can you say it? The line?
Which one?
Bro, don't...
Babies come from...
No, I can't finish that one.
Show me the
money. That one?
Okay, that's fine. This is a horrible introduction for somebody who deserves all the respect in the world. Rand Carthon. We're going to get things back on track now because Chris and I are just not doing well today. We're talking about some of the players who are sitting out right now. Obviously, they're looking for those new contracts. The biggest one out there that has been talked about for months and months and months is Micah Parsons and the Dallas Cowboys. Jerry Jones is known to just drag his heels for a really long time. And this was the number one thing, Rand, when people are like, what should the Cowboys do this offseason? Pay the man. Where do you think things stand right now with this team?
I think it's in a good place, and especially because you've seen the reports of Micah showing up to these off-season programs, which is always a good sign, especially for a guy who wants more money and wants to get his contract done. So for him to have him in the building right now sends, good signs and signals that they should be close to getting something done. You may want to say, hey, there's a new head coach and Brian Schottenheimer. Well, Schotty's been on that staff for a while. Micah knows him. He knows Micah. So you just look forward to him getting this deal done, and I think him being in the building right now is a good sign.
All right, so things are positive there. Not so much with the Bengals and Trey Hendrickson. Not only has he not been showing up, I guess he showed up one day in golf clothes, but he is now reportedly, quote, very dug in. This is the third year now with him, and yes, he did lead the league in sacks last year, but the third year in a row he has wanted some sort of change to his contract. When maybe there's starting to be a little bit of bad blood or just kind of some animosity between the two sides, from a front office perspective, how do you approach this situation?
Very, very delicately, because it can go either way at this point. If he's dug in, and we all know that Cincinnati Bengals have a certain way of doing business, and they're seen as one of the more stubborn organizations in terms of getting deals done. And so I was looking at it. The Bengals have $27 million in cap space, so they have the room to get this deal done. There's a early rumor that there's an offer out there of $28 million per year. But see, that deal only gets him north of the Josh Allen Hines, the Brian Burns, and a guy named TJ Watt, who also wants a new deal. So this is going to get really interesting. And one thing to look at is if they don't want to get this deal done, or they just reach such an impasse where it just becomes a way that they can't get something done, I would expect a team like Washington to come in and be a potential trade target, because Washington didn't address their need at the defensive end position during the draft.
Yeah, in Washington, there are several teams that have approached the Bengals and they've said, like, look, we will give you, or Trey Hendrickson, I should say, a long deal and the money you want, but we're going to try to get a trade done, and that hasn't been able to get done so far. What about the Bills and James Cook? We had Pete Prisco on earlier. James Cook wanting to be one of the highest paid running backs right now. He's seen several of his teammates get those large paychecks. Pete said, regardless if they get it done or not, this young man is going to show up and play.
Absolutely, and that's just his DNA. That's who he is. Kid from South Florida, come from a very storied program at Miami Central, and just ball his life. However, to me, this one is a tricky deal, and he's had back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons, and last year he just made it over 1,000 yards, but he only averaged 63 yards per game. And so you put that in comparison to a guy like Saquon, who is at the top of the list in terms of getting paid, and Saquon averaged 125 yards per game. But again, where it gets tricky is this range of running back in the pay scale, where you have from that $8 to $10 million a year range, you have names like DeAndre Swift, Aaron Jones, and Ramondre Stevens. And it's now becoming for the Bills is, do you see him in that category, which I believe they do, but do you put him in that other category where you have the Christian McCaffreys, the Jonathan Taylors, and the Saquon Barkleys? And I don't see him quite in that market. So finding that sweet spot for this deal, and especially at that running back position, is going to be the key.
One more team we want to talk about here. We mentioned the Commanders earlier, maybe going after someone like a Trey Hendrickson, but they do have one guy sitting out right now, Terry McLaurin, and at least in this situation, their GM Adam Peters has come out and said that we want him to be a Commander for a very long time. So things, at least on the surface, seem a little bit more positive here. Do you think maybe this is a contract situation they can agree to before the season begins, or at least Terry McLaurin will have some positive idea of the direction it's going, so he starts to come to practice and such?
Absolutely. And if you think of the Washington Commanders through all the ups and the downs and every which way this organization has turned, Scary Terry has been a consistent figure for this football team and has shown up and has played his butt off all throughout this process. And now he's coming along, and you add a Deebo Samuel, who they reworked his deal to make it a little more team friendly. And now Terry comes in, and I was looking at the numbers. He is the 16th highest paid receiver right now at an average of about $22 million a year. And And so we look at, he's clearly their number one, but we'll go in air quotes number twos. T. Higgins and Devontae Smith both make more than him, and I think they're in that $28 million a year range. So he has a legitimate argument for who he is to this organization and what he's done on a consistent basis. So knowing Adam Peters the way I do and knowing Dan Quinn the way I do in this organization and what they stand for, Terry is that, and he's the type of player that they're going to take care of and get something done.
Which they have said publicly. Rand, I'm curious, as a former GM, when it comes to the list of things that have to do with being a GM right now and the job, where does player contracts and figuring that out? Like, how frustrating is that on the list of things that a GM has to do? Or difficult, maybe. Maybe difficult's a better word.
Well, difficult or frustrating, you kind of know certain guys as you're coming into this offseason, and you've had these conversations back in January of knowing guys who may be up for deals or are looking for deals because their agents have reached out. Now it's just a matter of fitting everything under. And sometimes you just have organizational ways that you want to do things in settings that you don't want to cross. Because if you set a guy up for redoing his deal after 2 years and then the next player comes along, that sets organizational precedent, and you don't want to do that. So some guys you're willing to bend, and those are cornerstones like we just talked about with the Terry McLaurins, but you don't want to make that an organizational philosophy moving forward. So you have to be steadfast in your approach to getting these guys done.
It is a very delicate dance. Rand, we appreciate your insights. Thank you so much.